My clients will often ask me to explain to them what the means test is. The means test is a test that was put into the bankruptcy laws back in October of 2005, and it was designed to limit the number of people who qualified to do a Chapter 7. And it's basically a test that's designed to determine whether somebody has the means or the ability to pay back at least part of their debt in a Chapter 13 repayment plan. Now, the means test is actually a two-part test. There's what I call the short version of the means test, which is very simple, and then there's a longer version of the means test, which is very complex. If you pass the short version of the means test, then you automatically qualify to do a Chapter 7. So the short version of the means test is kind of like an express line. If you pass that, you're automatically in. On the short version of the means test, what the bankruptcy court does is they look at your entire household gross income for the past 6 months, from whatever source that might be. Whether it's a part-time job, a full-time job, severance pay, bonuses, commissions, overtime, any type of income that you have in the household, even if it's income from someone who's not filing bankruptcy. And the court takes the entire household gross income before taxes and puts it all together. Then they divide that by 6 to come up with the average gross household income for your household. They then compare that to the average gross income for a household of similar size in North Carolina. And if your average gross income for the past 6 months for your household is less than the average gross income for a household of similar size in North Carolina, then you automatically qualify to do a Chapter 7. Now, on the other hand, if your average gross income is more than the average gross income for a household of similar size, then you move to the longer version of the means test. On the long version of the means test, which is fairly complex, the court starts with your average gross income for your household for the past 6 months. And from that starting point, the court subtracts certain expenditures. When all of these allowable expenditures are subtracted from your income, if in the end you're left with less than $190 a month left over, then you still qualify to do a Chapter 7. But if you're left with more than $190 a month left over, then your only bankruptcy option might be a Chapter 13. Now, some of the things that you get to subtract on the long version of the means test are your average actual expenditures during the past 6 months, and some of them are allowances that you get regardless of what your actual expenditures have been. Some of the things that get subtracted as actual expenditures are things like the average amount that you've had withheld from your paycheck for payroll taxes in the past 6 months, or the average amount that you've paid for health insurance, life insurance, or disability insurance during the past 6 months, whether it's been payroll deducted or whether you paid it directly. You can also subtract the average amount that you paid in mortgage payments in the past 6 months, or the average amount that you paid in car payments during the past 6 months, or the average amount that you paid for child care or after-school care in the past 6 months, and the average amount that you paid in charitable contributions during the past 6 months. Now, in addition to all of that, you get allowances for certain expenditures. You get an allowance for food based on the size of your household. You get an allowance for clothing. There's an allowance for household utilities. There's an allowance for automobile operational expenses meant to cover gas and maintenance on your car. And in addition to that, you get an allowance for medical and dental expenses that aren't covered by insurance. But when you subtract all of these allowable expenditures from your average gross income for the past 6 months, if you're left with less than $190 a month left over, then you still have a Chapter 7 option. But if you've got more than that, then your only bankruptcy option might be a Chapter 13.